So I went into law because I didn't want to be a surgeon. I didn't want to be a doctor. I didn't want to be a college professor. I finally got through. There was only one. I just went down the family path, and it wasn't the wisest decision I ever made.
And you didn't, once you started to get into investment, your legal training, your mathematical background, your experiences. So
well,
what came to be resonant for you?
Well, what happened was there were things I didn't like about law practice, but I had an army of children to support and no family money or anything to start with. So I had to make my way in life for this army of children. And I had to, it was going to be a little difficult. And there were things about law practice I saw that were quite limiting. And what happened was, my pitifully small earnings as a young man, I kept underspending them, and I kept investing fairly boldly and fairly smartly. And at the end of my first 13 years of law practice, I had more liquid investments than I'd made in all those years of law practice pre-tax. I'd done that in my spare time with these little tiny sums. So it was natural for me, partly prompted by Warren Buffett's success, to think I should just start working for myself instead of for other people.
So another connection.
$1,000 in my spare time. I thought, well, what will happen if I do it full time?
So one of the things that connects
in my career
connects Caltech to investing is of course the process of discovery, which creates new technologies. And for an economic historian, one thing that we're very aware of is that technological change has driven a lot of the growth of the American economy over the last several centuries. But from your perspective as an investor, what have been the most dramatic transformation you've seen over those 75 years that Tom Rosenbaum reminded us that you've been connected to us, but also been living in Los Angeles?
There have been huge booms and huge busts, and that has been very interesting. And of course, the government has tried to do things that will dampen down the fluctuations and make recoveries from the busts happen faster. And of course, that's caused a fair amount of inflation in a life that's lived as long as mine. And what's happened in the investment field is, of course, that so many people have gone into it, and people have made so much money, and it's driven an almost frenzy of activity in the investment field. When I was young, there was practically nobody in it, and they weren't very smart. And now almost everybody's smart, even a Caltech graduate. A good proportion of them are sucked into finance by the money. And so that's been a hugely important development. I don't welcome it myself at all. I don't think we want the whole world trying to get rich by outsmarting the rest of the world in marketable securities. But that's what's happened. And there's been frenzies of speculation and so on. So it's been very interesting, but it's not been all good.
But at some level, once you make an investment, you're putting your money into the hands of an entrepreneur who is going to actually produce something. At least it seems that the value investment that you practice has that characteristic relative to a pure arbitrage approach to trying to make money in finance.
Well, I did not make my fortune, by and large, on the cutting edge of technology. My first investment with my pitiful savings of a venturesome sort, I invested in a company right in Pasadena, and it was called William Miller Instruments. And I damn near lost all my money. It was hell on earth. We just barely squeaked out with a substantial outcome. And what did us in is that the oscillograph that we'd invented and we were so proud of, and we thought it was going to knock the world flat. Somebody invented magnetic tape without telling me. And by the time we got that oscillograph ready to go to market, we sold three total in the whole world, whole country. So this technology is a killer as well as an opportunity. And my first experience, it damn near killed me.
And so, but that's sort of the other part, right? Over the 75 years that you've been involved in investing.
What that did for a long time was keep me out of venture capital on the edge of technology.
But even
I tried to avoid it.
But even so, in the companies that you deal with, some of them are market leaders at one point in time, and as you just suggested, some technological change or change in preferences will lead those companies to be with less of a market than they used to have for their products. And so how does one think about this over the long term? Because it's
over the
an
long
interesting
term, the companies of America behave more like biology than they do anything else. And biology, all the individuals die, and so do all the species. It's just a question of time. And that's pretty well what happens in the economy too. All the things that were really great when I were young have receded enormously, and new things have come up, and some of them started to die. And that is what the long-term investment climate is. And it does make it very interesting. Look at what's died. All the department stores, all the newspapers, U.S. Steel, John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil, the pale shadow of his former self. You know, it's just like biology. So they have their little hour, they have their little time, and then they get clobbered.
And so how does one, as sort of a witness, or sort of in a certain way, one lives longer than the life of some of these companies, sort of deal with change, right? So you could think about an investment portfolio that you create at a point in time will only have validity for a certain amount of time. And so how does one learn to deal with change? It's a question that I always ask my students, and I would just, how does somebody who has to take the resources of very large numbers of people deal with change? Any thoughts on that matter?
Well, some people try to get on the cutting edge of change, so they're destroying other people instead of being destroyed themselves. And those are the Googles and the Apples and so forth. Other people like me do some of that, joining things like Apple, and in some ways we just try and avoid big change that we think is likely to hurt us. And so Berkshire, for instance, owns the Burlington Northern Railroad. You can hardly think of a more old-fashioned business than a railroad business. But who in hell's ever going to create another trunk railroad? So it's a very good asset for us. So, and we made that success not by conquering change, but by avoiding it. Now, Burlington Northern itself has been quite clever at adapting technology to their railroad. Imagine the good luck of being able to take an existing railroad and double deck all the trains and raise the heights of the tunnels a little and so forth. And all of a sudden you got twice the capacity at very little incremental cost, which is what that railroad has done.
So that is a
everybody uses new technology, but it really helps to have a position that almost can't be taken away by technology. How else are you going to carry goods from the port of Los Angeles to Chicago except on our railroad?